Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this session of Let's Talk. I'll give everyone just a couple of minutes to join.
I'm trying to get my camera on. I don't know why it's off. This is Teray.
That's how cameras are. They have a mind of their own.
Like, what is going on? Guess I haven't done Zoom in so long. I use Doxy Meet for my virtual. So, oh goodness. I think I'm gonna go out and then come back in, see if that will help.
Sounds good. So as folks are coming in, I'd love it if you'd say hi in the chat and introduce yourself and where you are today. It's always nice to know who's here. And it's nice, I was saying earlier, it's nice to not be a webinar because I like seeing your faces because I'm a therapist. And so I like, nonverbal cues are like my thing. So say hi in the chat. I'd love to know who you are and where you're located. Yeah, Iris, it's okay if you just listen. You're welcome to have camera off and do whatever, take it in. You're totally welcome. Colorado.
Jones, I'm calling from Toledo.
Hey, welcome, Keith. We got folks in Washington, Colorado, California, lots of Americans. Azra from Alberta. Hi, I'm Canadian too. Nice to see other Canadians in the space as well. South California, Bay Area, Oregon, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Nice, welcome. Hi, everybody. Hello. Ohio, New York. Hey, Jennifer. Huntsville, California. Great.
I might go ahead and get this started, Lindsay.
Yeah, let's go.
Keep admitting people as they join.
Perfect.
My name is Marley, and here we have Lindsay Bonham. She's a therapist turned money coach who teaches therapists and health practitioners the money skills to feel empowered and in control of their private practice finances so they can have rich and fulfilling lives. Thanks, Lindsay, for being here. We're excited to have you on today, and I'll go ahead and kick it over to you to get us started.
Great, perfect. Okay. So thanks everybody for introducing yourselves in the chat. As I go along today, feel free to put questions in the chat. Eve is here with me, who is my right-hand woman, and she'll be keeping an eye on the chat so she can let me know if there's a question as well. Eve, you could bring that to my attention if there's something. We'll also have a little bit of time at the end, but also do slip in your questions because I have a lot of information I want to share with you today. Believe it or not, I have a lot to say about private practice finances because I care a lot about it. So I'm excited to share this with you today. And you're also going to be getting a tool today, if you want it, that you can take away and start using today. So I'm going to do that classic Zoom thing and share my screen. All right. So welcome everyone to our Let's Talk workshop. Today, I am here to talk to you about tracking income and expenses in private practice. So my goal with you today is that by the end of our time together, you're going to understand the importance of tracking your private practice finances as you go and the impact that that has on you as a clinician. You're going to learn key steps to start tracking your private practice finances. You're going to be introduced to a tool that you can start using today to track your finances and stop feeling disorganized and overwhelmed about them. So our agenda today is first, we're going to get into the cost of not tracking your private practice finances. Then we're going to talk about why tracking as you go makes you a better clinician and business owner. We're going to talk about overcoming avoidance, because something that I have learned time and time again about clinicians is we can easily avoid our private practice finances, and avoidance and all the reasons that we avoid can be a big barrier to being in touch with our money. And then I'm going to give you an intro, a walkthrough of a free tracking spreadsheet that I have that you're welcome to get a copy of today if you'd like it. And then we're going to have time at the end for a Q&A. So my very first question to get you thinking about how you're relating to what we're talking about today is just like shoot from the hip. What word comes to mind when you think about tracking your finances? And you're welcome to share in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute and throw your word out there. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think about tracking private practice finances? We got clueless, UG, UG is a good word. IRS audit in all capitals. Yes, I feel that in my bones. I understand. Spreadsheets, yes. Cumbersome, overwhelmed, adulting with a smiley. Yes, adulting can be fun.
CPA.
What was that one?
CPA.
CPA, yes, yes. Outsource. Excel sheets, insurance companies, yes. I'm going to guess, Gina, insurance companies is probably not a neutral word when you say it. At least I don't necessarily see folks experiencing insurance companies as neutral. A mess, prep for taxes, roller coaster, heavy, important, yes, confusing, holding breath, essential, time consuming. Uh-oh, business stuff. That's a good one.
Using my CPA.
CPA? Yeah,
and my bookkeeper.
Yes, yes.
They told me what to do, but it came too late.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So some delegating I'm hearing, maybe a little late, but better late than never. Tax write-offs. Yeah. Time, uncertainty, boring. Yeah, that's a good one. Boring. So just notice your word as we're coming into this conversation, because we all have like our gut reactions around money, right? And finances. And those often really inform our behaviors around them. And that obviously really impacts what happens with money in our businesses and in our lives. So who am I? I am a therapist turned business coach, and my focus is on helping therapists and health practitioners with their private practice finances. I'm the creator of Money Skills for Therapists. That's my course where I do that work with therapists, and I am a lover of both spreadsheets and feelings. So I'm like very much a therapist to my core. I'm a relational people person, but I also really love numbers and spreadsheets and bringing those two things together. What I find is a lot of folks who are financial professionals are very much like numbers people. They're not feelings people and relationship people. They're like really smart in that one way. And what I do in the work that I do with therapists is branch these two worlds. So talk to therapists about finances and money in language that we can understand. So I want to start by talking about the cost of not tracking our finances as we go. When we don't track our business finances as we go, ultimately what it means is we don't really know what's happening in our business, right? There's like a lack of information there. And there's a variety of costs that can come with not having that information. There's emotional costs, there are professional costs, and there are financial costs. The emotional cost of not tracking is not knowing what's happening in our money often creates background stress. There's like this noise in the background of like this thing that you should be attending to, but you're not, right? And that kind of like creates like a dark cloud that can kind of hang over you. There's uncertainty and confusion, right? Because you don't know what's happening. You don't know if you're saving enough. You don't know how much you can pay yourself. You don't know if you can afford to take time off. You don't know if you're charging enough. And then there's also huge tax time stress and anxiety, because when we're avoiding all the tasks that we could be doing as we go, we're not doing. And then at tax time, there's this like massive mountain of tasks to catch up on, whether we want to or not. Professionally, having that emotional money stress can undermine our confidence in ourselves as business owners. It's never a good feeling to sit across from a client and know that they think that you're like an adult who has your life together, and know that you have this thing that you're avoiding that is stressing you out and that you're not taking care of. There's like a disconnect there that can really undermine how we feel about ourselves as private practice owners. It also means that you don't understand your professional numbers, which often can lead us to booking and overworking more than we have to, because the tendency is when we don't know what's happening is we just book more. We're like, I'll just do more. I just have to make more. And that obviously has really high costs in terms of exhaustion and not having time for our own lives. And then, of course, there's the financial costs of not knowing what's happening in our business finances. When we don't know what's happening with our numbers, you don't know if you've saved enough for taxes. You could be oversaving for taxes, which creates unnecessary tightness and financial stress in your personal life. And I've seen this lots where folks misunderstand how much to put aside, and you're putting aside like way too much money and not able to get paid very much. You could also be overspending on your business and therefore not paying yourself enough in that way. And importantly, you just can't make thoughtful financial decisions as you go. You just don't have the information to make informed decisions. So an example of this is Vanessa. So I'm gonna share with you about Vanessa. So Vanessa starts her private practice, and very quickly she fills up because of her niche of eating disorders and trauma. So she's very sought after in her community. She finds a beautiful but expensive office space. She charges the fee she sees other clinicians around her charging, which is $130 an hour. And she starts taking lots and lots of pricey clinical trainings, constantly trying to better herself as a clinician. She's too busy doing demanding clinical work, 20 hours a week, doing this intense trauma work, to really think about administration or finances. So she just ignores the financial stuff and knows that eventually at tax time, she's just going to have to catch up on it then. However, despite working so hard, there's not much money left in her bank account when she goes to pay herself, which doesn't really make sense to her. She's working so hard, so why isn't she able to pay herself much more than she was making at her agency job? Money at home feels tight, and it's hard to put money aside for the things that really matter to her, like trips with her kids, because there's just enough coming in from her private practice to cover her portion of her family expenses. Vanessa also has some money aside for taxes, but she has no idea if it's enough. So she notices negative thoughts and fears about owing taxes at tax time and being in trouble with the IRS. Vanessa is a really skilled clinician, but 20 clients a week is too much for her. She's only a year into private practice and already starting to feel a bit resentful and a bit burnt out in her clinical work. She's overspending on running her business. Those trainings and rent are actually taking 45% of all the money she's earning, but she doesn't know it because she doesn't know her numbers at all. She also could be seeing fewer clients in a week if she reduced some of her spending on those clinical trainings, and she could even get paid more if she did that. But again, she doesn't have that information. She's actually oversaving for taxes, but since she doesn't know it, that worry about getting in trouble with the IRS is eating away at her for literally no reason. And no matter what, she's going to need to put together all that financial information at tax time anyways in one very painful weekend. I don't know if you're all familiar with the weekend of pain. I've seen different versions of it, but where you have to do a whole year of financial stuff in 2 days. And by that point, all of the financial choices that she's making are in the past and she can't change them. And all of these problems will be completely fixable if she started tracking her finances as she goes. So I'm curious, for folks listening, just put in the chat, what part of Vanessa's stories are familiar to you? Is there anything from Vanessa's story that sticks out to you as something that you have experienced or are experiencing? Unfortunately, all of it, says Jill. Oh, Jill, you're in the right place, Jill. That unawareness at several levels. Yeah, lots, but especially the 2 days of pain. Yes, Annalise, those 2 days of pain, the weekend of pain. Yeah, Kishana, much of it. Carla, I'm glad I showed up. I'm glad you showed up too, Carla. Yeah, so for so many clinicians, at least some part of this applies to us when we don't know what's happening with our business finances. So now I want to talk about the benefits of tracking as you go. We've just talked about the costs, of course, of not knowing our numbers. When you track your finances as you go, you get to know if you're saving the right amount for taxes. Taxes can feel like this large, mysterious force, but there are actually percentages that apply to your situation. And when you're tracking, you can actually know if you're meeting your tax obligations and you don't need to worry about it anymore. You can also know how much you can pay yourself on a consistent basis. I am a huge fan. I get really excited about really boring, nerdy things. You might have already caught on to that. So I'm a huge fan of paying yourself like a regular paycheck. So you know that even if you had a quiet month in your practice, you still get paid X amount of dollars a month. And if you have a busy month in your practice, you still get paid X amount of dollars a month, like you would if you were an employee somewhere. That creates stability in your life. And you can do that when you know your numbers. You're also spreading out this task of financial tracking as you go, rather than having it all pile up into that weekend of pain. And you're like spreading out something that could be terrible becomes just a small, neutral little task that you're doing over time. And then finally, you can make those thoughtful, strategic decisions about your money as you go. And that just feels good, like financially, that is really helpful, but also just seeing yourself be able to make informed decisions is good for you on many levels. So the first step with this is overcoming avoidance. What I have learned working with private practitioners over the last 3 years is many of us are in avoidance when it comes to our finances for so many reasons, right? Avoidance is adaptive. It's a coping mechanism. It's a way of protecting yourself. So whether it's that you have fear around money, huge anxiety, whether whenever you sit down to do your finances, you feel stupid, you have the thought that you're stupid. There's so many reasons that it's more comfortable to just not do it. But overcoming avoidance is essential to actually knowing what's happening in your finances. It's actually kind of the first step that needs to happen before everything else becomes possible. And one way that you can start to accomplish this is through what I call money time. So money time is a cute little name for setting aside time for yourself to work on your finances. You can pair it with other administrative tasks too, if you want. This is something that I find as clinicians, sometimes it's tempting to want to just avoid these parts of our business, like not think about them, but these things need to happen. So actually getting it into your schedule the same way you would get a clinical session into your schedule means that it actually gets the time that it deserves. So in order to make money time successful, you need to make it take care of you and work for you and who you are. So the first thing that I always suggest is to create a nice environment for yourself. Thinking about, what do you need? Where do you want to be when you work on your money? Is it at your dining room table with the sun streaming in? Is it in your office with the door closed so your kids can't bother you for like 30 minutes, right? Is it at a cafe where you like can make yourself sit and work on it and like not leave until you're done? Knowing yourself, thinking about what is the right environment for you to set yourself up to succeed at being able to actually work on your finances, even for just half an hour. Another thing that can be helpful is set a timer. I don't know if folks are familiar with like Pomodoro timers, this idea of like a 25-minute timer. The idea is that that's kind of the amount of time that we can really work on something productively, and then it's helpful to take a break. It also means that you get to kind of set a boundary with yourself of saying, okay, I'm gonna sit down and work on this for 20 or 25 minutes. I'm gonna set this timer. I'm only gonna work on this for 20 minutes. And when the timer goes off, if I want, I can walk away, right? Like I've fulfilled my commitment to myself for today. It really helps to do that, especially if you find yourself very avoidant, to really just give yourself that little slice of commitment and then let yourself be free. And then the last thing is to be curious about your experiences and your emotions when you do sit down. What happens when you sit down to work on your money? Do you suddenly feel really tired? You need to have a nap, right? Does your system drop you into like hypoarousal? Do you suddenly feel like you're having a panic attack? Right? And notice like thoughts like overwhelm and swirling thoughts. These are the experiences that can actually stop us from having control over our money. And they're essential to start to notice those so that you can, of course, make distance from them. Like we're all therapists here. We know that there's like 50 different ways, to work with difficult emotions, but being curious about yours, I find is a really good way to start. So an example of money time is Mark. So Mark schedules his money time for every Monday at 1 p.m. He decides that that's the time of the week that he's most kind of like alert. He's ready to work on business stuff. He's not tired yet. He has a natural opening in his schedule. So he sets his money time for every Monday at 1. Because Mark notices that he tends to get hypo-aroused and shut down when he goes to work on money, he puts on rock music to pump himself up. So he actually puts something in his environment that like lifts his energy. He sets a 30-minute timer for himself. So again, there's that clear time period, that clear boundary. And afterwards, he goes for a walk to kind of just like get some air, get some movement in his body, move on with his day. And this is the beautiful thing about tracking as you go, is when you do money time, half an hour a week, suddenly it's not like a piled up task anymore, right? Like you can just do half an hour and truly be done and have nothing else to do the next week. So we're chunking out this task into small, manageable bites. So I'm curious for you, how could you set up your money time to help you succeed? I'm going to ask folks to share in the chat. Just off the top of your head, what do you think would be helpful for you to have success at your money time? It could be a certain time of day, place, could be something to add to your environment. I'm a big fan of tea. I always have this massive cup of tea. It's the middle of the summer. It's like so hot today. And I'm drinking like a hot cup of tea because it's my like emotional safety blanket. So this is going to be with me when I do things that are harder. Deb suggested with wine. Yeah, if with wine is a good strategy in the evening, Deb. Probably not too much wine, depending on how you do with wine and math. Teray, doing it outside in the backyard. Yes. Nature, we know is good for our nervous system. Get lots of green around you. Schedule it, Deborah. Yeah. Scheduling it like it's an appointment, thinking about it as a gift to future me. Annalise, you are speaking my language. Gift to your future self is, I think, a wonderful strategy to connect with what this actually means for you. Jazz music, Brittany, yes, nice. Scheduling on the calendar, having music in a quiet space. Yes, Carmen, need something to keep me alert. That hypoarousal thing is real. Yes. So Carmen, other ideas for hypoarousal is have a dance party beforehand. Like really get your body moving, get energy moving through your body, have like a fun dance party, go walking beforehand. Like what can you do beforehand to get your energy up in your body before you sit down to work on it? With my assistant, yes, bringing in somebody else for some like co-working, co-regulation is a great strategy. Yeah, sitting outside in nature, walk afterwards. Yes. Yeah, Kim, like dance party. Yes. Dance party, somebody else once suggested Zumba. She does Zumba beforehand. But yes, thinking really about what you need. It's so personal, right? So what is going to get you in the right space to be able to do this thing that maybe naturally you don't really want to do? So the next step then is to get tracking. So tracking as you go, as I said, really like reduces the amount of time that it is. So once you start tracking and once you're kind of like caught up on your numbers, it can literally take you 10 to 20 minutes a week to get your books updated, and then you're done. It can become a very small task. You'll have that helpful information at your fingertips, and you're also going to save yourself that world of pain at tax time. Because again, we're doing something that needs to happen anyways, but we're doing it in a sustainable way over time. So I'm going to share with you right now a tour of a tracking spreadsheet that I have made and that I think I could confidently say at this point has helped hundreds of therapists track their finances. So I'm going to give you a tour of this sheet. So I will say too, something else that I love in addition to numbers and feelings is pretty spreadsheets. So I'm all about making spreadsheets that are pleasing to the eye. And that might seem trivial, but it's really not, because it's really valuable and important to set up systems that work for your brain, right? And I notice for me, I have higher sensitivity. If I have a friend who's like, hey, come look at this spreadsheet, and they have like red highlighter next to like neon green highlighter, like I'm out. That is like stressful, ugly, ick, bleh. And I can't see the information on the sheet because I'm overwhelmed by the ugly, right? So if you notice that you also have that kind of like sensitivity, it is a worthwhile use of your time to find a tool that you like the look of. And there's many different tools, but this is one option that I'm going to show you today to track. So this spreadsheet is all about tracking your private practice finances. This very first page has, Eve shared the link. Thanks, Eve. So there's a link in the chat if you want to go grab your copy. This very first page is a summary of the year to date. And this is the exact information that your accountant needs at tax time. So this page actually adds up the information from all the other pages. So as you go throughout the year, this page gives you a running total of what's happening in your business finances, right? So I'm going to go into a month view because this is where you're going to spend the most amount of time. So the way that this spreadsheet works is it gives you a space to track your income a space to track your expenses, and then it gives you back information, right? And that's ultimately what we need, is we just need to be able to put our basic information together and then see what that means. What are our numbers telling us? So on a monthly page, you'll see here at the top, there's a spot for your income. So we've made this sheet very customizable to what you need it to be. I'm a big fan of like, don't fit yourself into somebody else's box, right? Make your own box to make it work for you. So you'll see here at the top, we have different types of sessions. So one-on-one sessions, insurance sessions, group, sublet income. These are just random examples. You can change this to suit yourself on your own copy of the spreadsheet. So the way you do that is on this main page, all of these categories, when you change them up here in these white cells, it changes every other page in the spreadsheet, right? So you're going to want to start by coming in here and thinking about, how do you want to think about your income? You know, is it these categories? Is it different categories? Do you have a couple different locations and you want to see how much did you earn at this location versus this location? It's totally up to you. You get to decide how much or how little detail you want. So let's say I'm using my one-on-one sessions. So you can put in this information weekly if you want. So you could say week 1 in my one-on-one sessions, I earned $1,400. So now at the bottom, it's got me this total of $1,400, and there's a monthly total here. So as I go and as I add in more information, I'm going to see how much I earned of that certain type of session for the month, and then I'm going to see my total for the month. So let's say I also do a group in week 1. That's another $500. Now I see I've made 500 in groups this month, and it's giving me $1,900 for the month. So as you fill this in, it does the math for you. That's the beauty of spreadsheets. And it's going to give you your information back to you right away. Then we have our expense categories below, and throw in questions as we go, by the way. Are there any questions on that income section? I'll pause there for a sec. Nope, that all makes sense. Great. So our next section is your expenses. So I see this example I put in. Talaria is one of my old colleagues. So this was me pretending I had lunch with Talaria. I haven't seen her in a long time, but it would be nice to have lunch with her. So in your expenses section, you can then put your description of your different expenses that come in. So let's say I've got my Psychology Today that comes out, and let's say that it came out January 19th. And these would be the same year. I would put the amount for that in the category that it applies to. So these categories that we put here are the common categories in private practice. These are categories that apply to all of us pretty much. And that is why I have them in here. Again, if these don't make sense for your business or for your brain, change them, own it, right? And people often ask me, like, do I need to track with the exact categories that my accountant wants me to use? My answer is no. My answer is always use the information that makes sense for you and your brain, so you can feel empowered and get the information back that you need. So these are common categories, but again, if you want to change them, you just come back into the year-to-date page, and all of these cells here that are white, as you edit them and you write over with a new category, it's going to change on all the month pages. It's going to update all the pages at once. And so you get to really customize here the information that you're tracking with your categories. So let's say my Psychology Today, that's an advertising expense. So it's $30. So again, it adds up for me at the bottom. I can see, okay, in January so far, I spent $30 on advertising. And because I had that lunch and that advertising expense, so far I've spent $45.97 this month. So this is, again, just bringing the information together. It's decisions that you're making that now are reflected back to you as you go, right? When you sit down every week, you're going to see how much you're spending as you go. Carla asked, can the description category carry over too? On the pages here, Carla, the descriptions are just like specific to that line in that month. So it doesn't carry forward into future months. So like this is my January expenses. When I come here into February, I have a blank slate that again, I can fill in. So that stuff doesn't get carried forward, Carla, just the categories get carried forward from that main page when you make the changes. Lisa asked what kind of expenses would be used in the sublet income. So the sublet income is a type of income. There wouldn't necessarily be specific expenses associated with that, it would be office expenses. So if you have a subletter, you might have some extra expenses, Lisa, related to, like your office expenses, like your toner might be higher and whatever, but those you would just put in as normal expenses. Deb asked, if there are annual charges like liability, is that divided over the months or one-time entry? That's a great question, Deb. So this spreadsheet is cash-based. So cash-based means you put in the transaction when it actually happens. You might know, Deb, that in December, you're going to owe $300 of, your liability insurance. So you can set up a system for yourself of setting aside that money, knowing like, okay, if I'm going to owe $300 in December, I need to be putting aside, $25 a month. So you can set aside a system to save, but you're going to put it in this spreadsheet and you're going to tell the spreadsheet about it when it actually leaves your bank. So the information in this spreadsheet should really reflect what is happening in your bank. And I should say that if you don't have a separate business bank account where only business stuff is happening, I super, super highly recommend it. As you can see, I'm almost begging you by this hand motion. It's so worthwhile to create that separation. And then it's super easy too to just look in your business bank account and update the information here based on what happened in your business bank account, your business credit card. Could you provide an example of what might go under the assets category? Yeah, so NJ, assets are an interesting thing with accountants because they all have their own definition. So you're going to want to ask your accountant, even just if you put stuff in here as you go, you'll double check with them at tax time what they consider an asset. An asset is something that is valuable enough that it's written off over several years. So an asset, for instance, if you buy a $800 or $1,000 piece of furniture, usually your accountant would count that as an asset. And then rather than writing off $1,000 all at once, they're going to write it off on your taxes over several years. So they're going to be keeping track with you. They should have some documentation of like, oh, okay, in 2015, you bought this couch. So this year we write off this much more of the couch. So usually it's big things like computers, couches, any big cabinetry, like furniture that you buy for your office. And your accountant is going to have their own special number of what they consider big enough to be an asset. And I found that really varies from accountant to accountant. So my own accountant now is much like, she uses the asset category much less than my old accountant. So it's going to depend on what they think is a dollar amount that's kind of worth it. So those would be some examples of assets. Okay, and then at the bottom here, after we've put in our income and expenses, we get into salary. So what this spreadsheet is also going to be encouraging you to do is set aside enough for taxes. And to do that, you're going to set your tax rate, right? So everybody's tax rate is different. Some states I found have high tax rates, some have low tax rates. So it's really helpful for you to take the time to know what your tax rate is based on your city and state or province. And you can do that with like literally a Google search. Just say, 2022 taxes, New York City. And there are several online calculators where if you put in how much you expect you're going to make this year, it will tell you your total tax owed. And you're going to want to put in your average number for the year. So let's say that it says you're going to be in a tax bracket where you're up to like 33%, but your effective tax rate, also called average tax rate, is 22. 22 is the number you're going to want to put in here. We want to know on every dollar that you make, how much do you need to set aside? And you're going to set that number here in your spreadsheet. So your spreadsheet can prompt you to put aside the right amount of money. So this is 22. So it tells me that if I want to pay myself $2,500 gross, I have to put aside $550 for taxes, and I get to take home $1,950. So this is where you can run through your paychecks, and it's really going to prompt you to make sure you're setting aside enough for taxes. Having a separate bank account where you put tax money can be a really good strategy if you're tempted to like steal it. But this is going to give you that information of what your taxes owing for the year are estimated to be. And then at the bottom, we have this nice little summary for the month. So it tells me how much I brought in. It tells me how much I paid. Obviously, my business expenses would be higher than this. It tells me how much I paid my gross salary, how much of that could come home to me, and then how much I need to set aside for taxes. And then it gives me my buffer. So in this case, because I put my income is really low, it's telling me that if this was actually what I did this month, I paid myself 600, or I took 645 more dollars from the business than I made that month. So it's just giving me a monthly picture. Some months you might do that. If you're on vacation, you might get paid even though you didn't see a lot of clients, but most months you're going to want this to be a positive number. You're going to want to see that you're leaving some money left behind in the business. And then the final piece of information here is your operating expense ratio. So this is how much money you want to be spending running your business, right? Our businesses require a certain amount of money to operate. We have things like rent and that liability insurance and Psychology Today. So you get to set for yourself, once you start to know your numbers, what percentage you want to be spending on your business. Now in the era of teletherapy, we spend a lot less. So if you work from home, you might set a percentage that's more like 15%. You know, you're going to know that of all the dollars that come in the door, you want to be spending 15% of those on running the business, and the rest you want left to pay you. Because whatever you don't spend on the business, you get to pay yourself. So you can set your percentage here, and then this tells you how much you actually spent. So this month, because I only spent $45, my operating expense ratio was only 2.4%. That's not realistic. Yours is always probably going to be higher than that. But I got this little comparison here. So if I see that that number starts to get a lot higher than the goal I've set for myself, it prompts me to ask myself, okay, am I overspending somewhere? Do I want to make adjustments? And this is where, again, you're getting that information back as you go. So what all of this does is it comes back and populates this year-to-date page. Again, this is the information that you give your accountant at the end of the year. And I've had many therapists go through my course who this is exactly what they use. They just give this to their accountant at the end of the year. This is all the information they need. So this gives you then that total global view. And it also says here how much is estimated to be that I'm going to owe for taxes, and then how much I paid for taxes. So this year so far, I've told it that I haven't paid any taxes. So you're going to see that there's a remainder. It's telling me that I should somewhere have $625 set aside for taxes. When you do go to pay taxes, there's a section. Oh, am I in the wrong spreadsheet? No, where am I? I'll have to find that. I'll get back to you folks. There is a section, there should be a section in here. We might send out a different version of the spreadsheet later that gives you a total of what, so when you make a tax payment, you can say, I paid this, and that affects that total. So it looks like we might have an intermediary version of the spreadsheet. So we will resend a link. But that again lets you track that tax obligation. And if you have set an amount that makes sense for your situation, you're setting aside the right amount, you're going to know that this amount you've set aside is enough, and you're not going to have to worry about taxes. Shannon asked, how do you set an operating expense ratio? Would it change from time to time? So what I love to do, Shannon, for like these big picture questions, and I love big picture questions because it's easy with finances to either avoid or get like super sucked into the details. And this is a really good question to have that big picture, which is a very great place to be with your finances. So the way that I suggest figuring that out, Shannon, is look at your numbers and figure out what is the average that you bring into your practice. Looking back over, say, the last 6 months. Over the last 6 months, on average, how much do you bring into your practice? Because some months are going to be higher, some months are going to be lower. So we get out of the weeds. Once you figure out that average number, then you can think about how much of that number you want to be spending on running your practice. You might have an office that's like beautiful, but pretty expensive. So that might mean that you choose to spend a little bit more. The going kind of suggestion for most types of businesses is 30%. So 30% of the dollars that come in the door, you should be spending on running your business. And the other 70% should be coming to you in the form of like income taxes that you set aside and paycheck. So that's a standard number. But as I said, if you're telehealth and you don't have a rented office, that's probably going to really bring down your amount. So you might decide to set yours at 15% or 20%. But what's really important is understanding your numbers. And I would say, generally speaking, don't go above 30%. But you could certainly set it lower than 30%, and then you can just keep your eye on that number and see how that feels. But would it change from time to time? Absolutely. If you decide that you want to move from telehealth into an office and rent space, that's going to raise your operating expense. That's normal. That makes a lot of sense, and that can be completely worth the money. If you decide you're going through a period of your career where you want to level up, and spend more on like an amazing training that you've been thinking about for 2 years, that's going to bring up your operating expenses. So you can adjust your expectations accordingly, right? We don't want you to be stuck. Like budgeting and being intentional is not about depriving yourself or stagnating yourself professionally, but it's about being thoughtful. So you could decide, okay, I'm going to do this somatic training that's going to be like $8,000 over 2 years. So I'm going to adjust my operating expense ratio that I expect to see so that I account for that new expense, and it's not a stressor. It's a conscious decision that I'm making. And that's a really empowering way to experience that, rather than have it be you're just kind of spending the money and like hoping that you still have enough to do everything else. And this is what the spreadsheet is going to give you back that information of if you have the money and how much money you have to do all the things you want to do. Amy asked, would you change this process if you're a sole proprietor versus S Corp? Yes, with, let me think about that for a second, Amy. With S Corp, a big difference is the taxes, right? So you're able to be taxed differently and pay yourself dividends. So with those dividends, that money you pay yourself that's not a paycheck, those are taxed differently. So you would probably show those differently in the spreadsheet when you take a dividend, and you could talk to your accountant about how much money you need to set aside when you give yourself a dividend. But that's really the only difference that it would make, is you just want to make sure that your tax situation is reflected in the way that you set up the spreadsheet. So this is the spreadsheet. And as I said, I've had hundreds of therapists use this from workshops that I've run and from my course, and you're welcome to give it a go. And truly, it does not have to be more complicated than this. If you're running like a fairly straightforward, definitely a solo practice, even a simpler group practice, it does not have to be more complicated than this to give yourself the information that you need. Oh, I stopped sharing. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep going. Just a second. All right. So let's go back to Vanessa, who we talked about earlier. So Vanessa starts using her finances spreadsheets, and she starts to understand her numbers. Let me just get Vanessa's story. There we go. As she engages them for like just 20 minutes a week. Seeing her numbers, she realizes that she's been overspending on those trainings. So she sets a generous but firm budget to put money back into her pocket and allow her to start saving for those family trips that mean so much to her and her kids. Her background stress subsides because she knows now that she's got enough aside for taxes and is no longer worried about getting in trouble with the IRS. As clients graduate, Vanessa also doesn't replace them all. So she goes down to 16 clients a week instead of 20. She starts feeling less burnt out and more excited again about her work. Her clients also notice that she seems brighter and more excited in their sessions, and they appreciate how impactful their sessions are to her, that their sessions are with her to their lives. Vanessa no longer needs to dread tax time prep because she's got all the information in one place already, and she can just hand it over to her accountant at tax time. Instead of a stressor, tax time just becomes a neutral, another part of running a successful private practice. And there she is, much happier. This is the happier Vanessa, the lighter Vanessa. So I would love to hear from you. What is your next step when it comes to better tracking your business finances? Share in the chat.
The chat said it was turned off.
What? Oh, it might be back. I just saw one. Alfredo. Can you get in there, Leslie? Is it still blocking you?
No, not anymore. It's fine.
Okay, perfect. Great. So Shamika says avoiding the avoidance. Yes, avoiding the avoidance. And some of the strategies you talked about, try them. See what's helpful for you. Maybe it's co-working with a friend to like make yourself do the thing. Finding ways to hack your own brain so you can avoid the avoidance is really powerful. Alfredo says utilizing the spreadsheet. Great. Anna says set up the time to do it. Yes. And Anna, that could take you like literally 3 minutes to like set a repeat appointment, even right in your client management software. Like block that spot, make it sacred. It will definitely pay off. Annalise said, I love the spreadsheet. Honestly, formatting a sheet has been a big hurdle. Yeah. Yes, this has got all those pieces bound together. It's pretty complicated. So I'm glad that we could do that work for you. Kim says setting the time aside. Yes. Yes. And it's not much time. So that's also something to notice is how can you connect with the value of this and notice that it's actually like literally half an hour of your week and actually not that big of a time commitment. Kishana says create a system, including using the spreadsheet. Yes, systems make a big difference. Set a time and stop avoiding. Stop avoiding the inevitable, track the numbers. Yes, Tiffany. Getting started, Emily. Yeah, and getting started, I mean, it's the same thing with like doing yoga, going to the gym, eating better. Like sometimes it's that getting started that's the hardest part, but once you start to create the habit and once you get yourself there, it's not as hard as you think it is. Prioritizing time, processing dread of going back to the whole rest of the year I've avoided. Yes. And with that, Emily, what I suggest, what I find with therapists, and maybe you're all exceptions, but I doubt it, is we are a bunch of perfectionists and we like to do things just perfectly, and which means we can often make our lives harder than they need to be. So if you're watching and you have not tracked anything this year and you're like, oh my God, I have so much work to do. I have 7 months of catch up. Don't do it. Start moving forward. You can catch up later. If this is a new skill for you, if you're doing something that you haven't done before, don't make yourself go back in time and catch up on everything. If you want to try this spreadsheet, or if you've got a different tool you already know you want to go back to, start moving forward, track like last week, track the coming week. And then as it becomes more neutral and you build your skills and confidence, then go back in time and catch up. You don't have to catch up just to be able to get started. It's much better to build that small habit and see yourself making progress than make yourself have to go back and, you know, do 7 months of work before you're allowed to start moving forward. SU says, I don't have a private practice, thinking I may pursue that route. I am very biased. I think it's a great route, really great route. Setting up the spreadsheet, getting a business account, Veronica. Yes, get a business account. Business accounts, Veronica, like the hardest part usually is just dealing with banks. I have a phrase that I used last week with a student about bank feelings, capital B, capital F, because dealing with banks sometimes can just be a special kind of bureaucratic pain. So sometimes it's just getting through that hurdle, knowing that it might be a bit of a pain in the butt, but once you have it, you have it. Like you'll have it for the rest of your time in private practice. So it's definitely a worthwhile thing to do. Spreadsheet, setting aside time. This is helpful. Thanks. You're welcome, Raphael. Carla, I'm happy to hear others have the same issue. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I think because money is one of these things, Carla, that we don't talk about, there's so much silence about it. We assume everybody else has it figured out. And like, spoiler, they do not, let me tell you. And people can have very, very successful practices too, and be super skilled clinicians and even have large groups and not have this piece figured out. That's very normal because we didn't learn, but now you've got a tool to get you started. To Ray, this makes it seem much more simple than I make tax time feel like. Yes. So just getting started with the spreadsheet. Yes. Yes. It does not have to be that huge weekend of pain. Kishana, I see your question. I'm going to answer it in a minute about credit cards. Anne, courage and confidence about decreasing the client load and not worried about having low funds. Yes. Power to you. I think it's so tempting, like I said earlier, to just work more. And if you suspect that you don't need to work as much as you are, try it out, see what happens. Work less and see what happens with the money. Do a little math and see how much you would be earning if you worked less. Often we can be earning more than we realize when we're not in touch with the numbers. Investigating banks, great. These are great steps. Deb says, I'm having trouble downloading, copying the spreadsheet. Deb, Eve is here now. So Deb, maybe if you and Eve could have a private conversation, Eve, if you could reach out to Deb Fellio, we'll see if we can get that spreadsheet to you. Therese says, this is motivating. It makes me excited about number crunching. I'm glad you're excited about number crunching. I am too. Okay, so, Alfredo's asking, where can I access the spreadsheet? Eve, can you drop the link again in the chat for Alfredo for the spreadsheet? And Raphael, can we get this on Excel? So you can download it when you're in Google Sheets. There's the file option. There is download, and you can choose to download it as an Excel file and have it on your computer. So it works that way as well. All right, so starting to wrap up. So at the end of the time together today, you now understand the importance of tracking your private practice finances and the impact that has on you as a clinician. You've learned, I didn't do 4 key steps, I didn't have time. You've learned the first step to starting tracking, which is overcoming that avoidance. And you've been introduced to this tool that you can start using today. Don't forget to get your free tracking sheet. There's the link there. And I think Eve just dropped it in the chat as well. And I'm sure it'll be posted too with this workshop if for some reason you don't get your copy saved today. And if you want more support with your private practice finances, I have a free 1-hour masterclass. It's the 4-step framework to get your business finances totally in order, where I lay out how I help therapists do this and so much more in terms of changing your relationship with money. So this is what I do. I'm actually retired as a therapist. I now 100% help therapists with their private practice finances. So if you go up to moneynutsandbolts/links, you're going to see a link there for the 4-step framework, and you can check out the free 1-hour masterclass. And if you want to be more in my world, I'm on Instagram at moneynutsandbolts. I have a podcast called the Money Skills for Therapists podcast, where I have emotionally attuned conversations about money on a weekly basis with guests and colleagues and students. I do live coaching on there, and moneynutsandbolts.com. So questions. I'm going to stop my share, and there might be questions. If you asked me a question earlier that might have got buried, throw it in the chat again. I want to answer it. There's just been lots of questions come by, so feel free to throw them in the chat. That's what I'm trying to say. There was a question a minute ago about business credit cards. Let me just see if I can find it here. Yes. Oh, here we go. Kishana, would you recommend a business credit card for startup costs? So Kishana, that's a great question. And my answer would be, it depends on your personal financial situation and your relationship to credit cards. So it is normal that at first we put more money into our practice than we get out of it. That's a normal business thing. For some reason, we have this kind of expectation in therapy that you can just like start a practice from nothing and start making money right away. And that often puts a lot of pressure on you. So Kishana, I like your thinking about like funding that practice, because that is what most of us have to do. And so it's figuring out the right way for you to do that. If you have a healthy relationship with credit cards and you don't tend to like overspend credit cards, then absolutely a credit card could be a way to do that. And if you don't have other options, like if you don't have personal money that you can loan your business, then a credit card is absolutely a way to get started. If you struggle with credit cards and debt, then it's making sure you set clear boundaries around how much money are you putting into starting up your practice. I like to think about practice startup as giving yourself a loan so it's clear. Right? So it's like, how much of a loan does this business get to get started? Is it $2,000 to get started? You know, does it get $5,000 to get started? But being clear about that so that if you hit that amount and there's something not working, you can stop and assess, how much more money do I want to put in this? Do I need to be working harder to get clients? You know, you can have honest conversations with yourself about how much money you want to be putting on the line before money comes back. But a credit card can absolutely be the way to do that. You can also lend yourself money if you have any personal cash available. I suggest like taking money from your personal bank account, send it to that separate business bank account. So you can very clearly see, this is my loan. And then if you run out of that money, you can decide if you want to loan yourself more money. So that's my suggestion on that. But it's definitely in terms of having separation, if you are going to use a credit card, having that separate business credit card, whether that's actually like a business credit card, or if you're in solo practice, it can just be one of your personal credit cards that you just use for the business. It doesn't have to be a special business credit card. Those are more expensive. Everything with business at the start of it associated with a bank is more expensive. If you're in solo practice, you don't actually need to have a business credit card and a business bank account if you're just doing business as yourself, if it's just your name. So you can just use any credit card, but having a separate credit card for the business is wise in terms of just that separation and clarity. Let's see here. Okay, I'm going down to the bottom to see if there's new questions. Oh, great. Alfredo, you got the spreadsheet. Awesome. Joanne asked if you can contact us if you have trouble getting the spreadsheet. Yes, Joanne, the way to contact us is our hello@moneynutsandbolts address. If you go to our website, or you can reach out to us on Instagram. We're absolutely here to help you if you're having trouble, tech trouble. My team is here to help you get all that stuff. Thanks. Okay. Helpful and validating. That's great. Helpful and empowering. Okay, Ciara, would you recommend working with a CPA in your first year of business? This year you'll have an income for roughly half of the tax year. Yes, I do. I do recommend working with an accountant if you have a private practice, period. The reason is we don't know what we don't know. And they are really nerdy and excited about tax law, which you are probably not, and I certainly am not. So I always recommend working with an accountant, a CPA, somebody who's a professional, so they can catch and make sure that you're meeting your tax obligations properly, that you're claiming all the business expenses you're entitled to, and that you're getting any kind of like tax credits that you're entitled to. So I definitely recommend working with an accountant at any stage of private practice. Lisa asked quarterly versus yearly paying taxes. So with that, Lisa, it depends on what has been required of you from the IRS or the CRA, depending what country you're in. If you have been around and you've filed enough if you've passed a certain threshold of earning and the government knows about you, they're going to want you to pay quarterly. So if you've received a letter saying you need to pay quarterly, then I suggest paying quarterly. I've heard a mix, frankly, from accountants about like what the punishment is for not paying quarterly. And of course, what I find with accountants is they have very different risk tolerance as people, and that's going to mean they give you different advice. But generally, I would say if you've been told to pay quarterly, pay quarterly. If not, then you can pay yearly. But again, it's thinking about what do you need? If you're going to be tempted to spend that tax money on some great training that comes along or on a family vacation, then you're probably better off paying it quarterly just to get it kind of out of your reach, right? Know yourself. I think it's always a key of like create systems that are smarter than you are. So if you know there's going to be temptation there, then send it off quarterly or even more often, or put it somewhere else so that it's out of reach so you don't end up spending it and being in a really tough spot at tax time. This is very helpful, so informative, great. I'm glad this is helpful. Yeah, paying taxes, yeah, I just talked about that one. Lisa asked, is 20 scheduled clients a week part-time position or more? What is considered full-time? I've heard different opinions regarding this. To help understand, I'm working part-time or full-time. So Lisa, I'm not going to unfortunately be able to give you an authoritative answer. I'm going to give you an opinion. And my opinion is very much based on like who you are as a person. What is your capacity as a clinician, right? So for me, being a bit of a sensitive plant, my clinical specialty when I was in practice was dissociation and complex trauma. So it was very heavy work. It was very intellectually demanding work. And I could see 16 clients a week and then I'm done. That was full-time for me. There was nothing fuller than that. And so when I thought about my private practice finances and what I earned, I had to use that as my like math because I was never going to be able to work more than 16. So I find personally, like I don't tend to see folks working more than kind of 20 to 25 seems to be the upper limit, but it's like that's the beautiful thing about private practice. Nobody else gets to tell you how to do it. So you figure out your number and then that's your full time and then make the numbers work for your number. I see Marley's back, which I think means we're out of time.
Yes, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Lindsay, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this session of Let's Talk. I want to remind you that this recording and all resources will be shared with you later this week via email, and you can join the Triad group also to continue this conversation even further. I've dropped the link in the chat below. I can do it right now again. And then if you already have a Triad account, you are automatically added to this group. So let me add that link to the chat.
Yes, and I will be in there answering questions because I see lots of questions we're not going to get to today. So feel free to jump over to that group and I'll be around for the next couple of weeks, making sure all questions get answered.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Lindsay and Steve, and we will sign off for today. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.